So what we're going to do now is go through a series of different types of exercises that explain the basic mechanics of image creation in Photoshop. And what we're going to concentrate on is selections, layers, and transparency. And my contention is that once you understand these mechanics, the rest of Photoshop will fall into place. As we work with these things, we will also go through using the tools in the toolbar. So we have our canvas. We're going to start up at the top. And these first sets of tools right here are tools for managing and selecting your canvas. And we're going to go through understanding what each one of these do. The move tool, the marquee selection tools, the lasso tools, the object quick selection and magic wand tool, your crop tools, and your other tools that are available to you. What I want to do first is I want to go down to the brush. And I want to start by making a brush. So a brush is a tool that you'll use to apply either paint or, in some circumstances, an effect, in others, a mask. So starting with understanding the mechanics of using a brush, it's a good place to start. So down at the bottom of my toolbar, you'll see that there are two little boxes. One is the foreground color swatch. The other is the background color swatch. And what that means, basically the foreground color swatch is whatever color you happen to be painting with. That background color swatch, the definition of what that means will change depending upon how the canvas is set up. We'll go into more details about that later. Right now, I'm going to click into the foreground color swatch. It's going to bring up something called the color picker. So this is where I pick up a color. Now, there are a number of ways to think about color, and each discipline has its own way of defining color. And I can use any of these disciplines to create my art. I just want to use the right one for the right discipline. So I have the HSB system, the RGB system, the LAB system, the CMYK system. I have web safe colors. All of those are different systems for creating a color. Right now, leave it on the H here, and let's go through using this color picker. So the first thing is I have a spectrum. I can drag this up and down, or I can click into it to change the spectrum of colors. And then I can click anywhere on the box in the middle to choose a specific color. So if I click in the upper right-hand corner, I'm choosing the most perfect, the most intense incarnation of that particular color. If I click down on the lower left and lower right, I'm choosing black. If I click in the upper left, I'm choosing white. So that means that if I click along the right-hand edge, I'm mixing whatever color it is with black. If I click along the top from right to left, I'm mixing whatever color I happen to be using with white. If I click along the left-hand edge, this is using this, having it set to this setting right here is where I want it. I am mixing grays, okay? And I know it's a perfect gray when I have the same number in all three of those slots there. Okay, if I have the same number in all three RGB slots, then it is a perfect gray. And then if I click diagonally through the center, I'm mixing that color, whatever color it happens to be, with gray. So I'm going to click, choose a color, click OK. I've got my paintbrush, and then by just holding down the left mouse button, I'm going to apply paint. Now, this canvas is transparent. By transparent, I mean that it is empty. Okay, there's nothing in there. We tend to think of white as a color too, but white, we tend to think of white as empty, but white is a color too. So if I come over here and I choose white, for instance, let's look at this, and I paint with it, you'll see that this is different, right? This is white and this is transparent. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to show you how to change the size of your brush, okay? And we're going to come all the way up to the top here with the brush tool activated. And we're going to click this little tab right here. And this is all of our brush options. I'm going to close that. So one of the things about Photoshop is not only when Photoshop does something, they overdo it. So if you go to Window and go to Brushes, there's this brush palette over here. And that's the same brush palette as what you find here. And then there's also brush settings. And those brush settings allow me to make very sophisticated brush elements, right? Where I can fine tune and create all kinds of brushes. We're not going to worry about that just yet. Just wanted to show you that those are options. In the upper left-hand corner here are some default settings. And then if I click this tab right here, these are where I find this is where I find my brushes. So you'll see that they are categorized, and each of these brushes have different characteristics. There's basically two characteristics, and I mean there's more than two, but we can start with just two. One is the size of the brush, and the other is the softness or hardness of the brush. And I can vary that by dragging this up and down, and by dragging this up and down. Or I can click and choose one of these brush options. Okay, so if I click on one of these brushes here and I paint, I'm painting with that color. Let's load another color in there. I'm painting with that color. All right, so the next thing I want to do is change the size of the brush. I'm going to click again, increase the size of the brush, click away, and paint again. All right, so that's how I manipulate my brushes. That's how I change the size of a brush. That's how I choose a brush. And that's how I apply a brush, right? And you'll find all kinds of different types of brushes available to you. And you can load brushes. You can create your own brushes, and you can import brushes into Photoshop, okay? So now that we've got some paint on the screen, let's use a different brush. I want to fill this palette up with some paint. Let's try some different colors. And right now, I just want you to experiment and play. Let's get this filled up. All right, and so now what we're going to do is I'm going to go through explaining some of the tools to you, and then there'll be other tools that we'll come back to later. So the first tool I want to talk about is the eyedropper tool. So the eyedropper tool, now the eyedropper tool allows you to select the color that you've already used in your canvas. So right now, the color that's loaded into my foreground color swatch is green. If I grab that eyedropper tool and click on another color, it's going to load that color into my foreground color swatch. So the idea is that if I want to trap a color that's already been used in my document, I can grab that eyedropper. Now, one of the things I want you to notice is that lots of times when you click on these tools, there will be additional tools underneath. When you look at the little triangle in the lower right-hand corner of that tool, that means if there's a little triangle there, that there are additional tools hidden underneath that tool. So that's how you use the eyedropper tool, okay? So next we're gonna go down and we're gonna look at the eraser tool. So if I click on this eraser tool, once again, it's controlled by the size of a brush, and I bring it onto my canvas and scrub, I can erase from my canvas, right? So right now we're doing a type of editing that's called destructive editing. And lots of times when you're editing your document, this would not be the ideal way to make an edit. But right now, I want you to try it so you can see how that works. I'm going to paint that area back in, and I'm going to add some more colors. And we're just kind of going through some of these tools here so you understand what they're for. And right now, just experiment with them. And then in many circumstances, the edits that we're making now, there are other ways to make the same types of edits that are more sophisticated that we'll get to later. So now we're going to come down and I want to look at the blur, sharpen, and smudge tools. So I'm going to zoom in on my canvas. And there's a number of different ways to zoom in. Control plus to zoom in, Control minus or Command plus, Command minus to zoom in and out, Command or Control 0 to fit on screen. Okay. I can also use the magnifying glass and left click to zoom in, alt click to zoom out. Okay, after I've zoomed in, I can hold down the space bar to push my canvas around, or I can switch to the hand tool. Okay, so I'm going to Command 0, which makes the image fit on screen, or Control 0 makes the image fit on screen. I'm going to come down here and I want to look at the blur tool. And when I use this blur tool, I'm going to make the brush nice and big. When I use this brush and I rub it over a certain area, you're going to see it start to soften and blur together. And I'm just rubbing it in the upper left-hand corner, and I want you to try this as well. And what this does is it takes the differences between the pixels and it lessens them and blurs them. So the more I rub, the blurrier it will get, the more it will take those pixels and smooth them into one another. Now, if I were working on an actual piece of art, there are some circumstances where I might grab the blur tool, but I would probably do this differently. I would probably make a selection or a mask and apply a blur through a filter. But for now, just try that blur tool, okay? And that's what it does. It blurs, softens the edge. I'm going to go over to my canvas, click, sharpen. I'm going to make my brush bigger. And I want to make it big so you can see the effects clearly and quickly. And when I grab the area in the upper right-hand corner and apply, you'll see that the differences between the pixels become sharper. It raises the differences between the pixels, hence the term sharpening. Sometimes you may need to sharpen, sometimes you may need to blur. And once again, in this circumstance, I'm using the tool over on the tool bar, but if I were doing this for a real piece of art, I would probably create a selection or create a mask and then apply the sharpen through a filter. We'll get to that later. And then last one, let's look at smudge. So you can see very quickly, I'm using a nice big brush. So it's very obvious what smudge does, right? Takes it and just smears or smudges that content across the canvas. All right, let's go on down to the next set of tools, and that's the dodge, burn, and sponge tools. So remember that Photoshop is a digital darkroom, and a lot of the tools in Photoshop started off in traditional photography. When you work in with a traditional photography, you go into a darkroom. You have your enlarger. You turn the enlarger on and have your negative, and you put that sheet of photosensitive paper on the negative. You expose it to the light, and that heats that image and burns it into the sheet of paper. And then you have to use emulsifiers to lock that image in. And one of the things that we used to do is you'd have a little paddle. It would look just like that shape there. It was a little piece of paper on a stick, kind of like a lollipop, but it was a piece of paper. And you would use that to try to dodge where the light was hitting. So you would dodge the light so the light would be less than one spot on the image by taking that little paddle and waving it over your image in certain areas. And that's dodge. The next one is burn. So you would literally take your hand and form it into like a C with a hole in the center. And then you would wave that over part of your photograph on the enlarger and that would burn into the image. So these tools come directly from the darkroom, and that's why they look the way they do. They actually represent real tools that you would use in a darkroom. Now, once again, if I were going to do a dodge or burn type of effect, I would probably do this differently. I would make a selection or a mask, and then I would apply similar types of effects through a filter or through a layer, through a adjustment. All right, so we looked at dodge, we looked at burn, and then sponge. Once again, you would have a sponge and scrub your image. And what Smudge does is it desaturates the image. So you can see it's literally sapping the color out of that image, okay? So let's stop there, and we're going to come back and continue in just a second, going through the tools on the toolbar, and then we're going to get into doing some selections and working with multiple layers.